In the 90s, Playmates Toys made the deepest line of Star Trek action figures in history. My name's Keith, and I'm a collector working towards owning all 284. I've been a Trek fan for almost 35 years, and most people are sick of me talking about it. But somehow I've convinced my old friend Mike to review them with me on Look at My Star Trek Toys! Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Look at My Star Trek Toys. It's our little YouTube show where I, Keith, tell my old buddy Mike all about my toys, all about my Star Trek toys. This week, we are up to some of my favorites. I would say these are my second favorite uniforms in Star Trek lore, and that is, of course, we are looking at the Star Trek movie era red uniforms here on the toys. Now, sadly, Playmates made very few of these, and they didn't even fill out the entire original series cast. So let me just give you a little bit of information about these uniforms themselves. Because they didn't show up in the first movie, the first original series movie, the motion picture. They didn't arrive until Wrath of Kahn in 1982. So after the original series wrapped, they decided, when they decided to make a movie and not a new Phase 2 television show, they, of course, redesigned the uniforms. And as it turned out, they sucked. And we will do an episode on the motion picture uniforms and in all of their blandness, their bland, clingy glory, which was not good for any number of different reasons. But today we're talking about 1982 comes along, Wrath of Kahn. Arguably the best of the Star Trek movies, although I think First Contact could definitely have an argument there. But they're like, wow, we need to fix those uniforms because those are terrible. So they designed these ones, the iconic red uniforms that everybody wore. There's a lot going on there. So let's just talk a little bit about the divisions, because much like the Star Trek Voyager Deep Space Nine, the division colors were a little bit more subtle. So if you would pull up the picture of our cast here that I put in there, I can walk us through all of the colors and divisions. So
yeah, you sure did, Keith.
Yeah,
you sure did send that to me.
I did, and you have it loaded up for sure. But
I sure did at one point. Why don't you stall while I pull that up?
Well, I'll start at the very top, and you can see, in Mike's picture behind him there, you can see Kirk and Spock with a white collar and a white little shoulder dealie, because white is the command division. And that is how they, it's sort of what became red on Next Generation, but was yellow in the original series, because these things move and people wear different things. And you can also see that Sulu is wearing command division as well, because by the time Star Trek VI rolls around, Sulu is in command of his own ship. Now, if you go down to yellow, you will see that's operations. And so Scotty wears yellow. And there's the collar, you have the little stripe on the shoulder, and also on their wrists, there is another band that signifies this color with their division and rank. Now, if you continue down, you can see McCoy wears green, because that is sciences. So you'll see the doctors with that little bit of green there. And the last one is gray, even though it looks a little bit purple in this picture here. That's also operations communications-ish. So you see Chekov and Uhura wearing gray. Star Trek always feels like it has one too few colors for the divisions, which is why engineering and security have the same colors as opposed to sciences. But so be it. That's what it is. And the last color that we will see in Wrath of Kahn are the cadets who wear red. And we'll show figures with that. So that was what was going on there. So you had the rank insignia on the shoulder and on the wrist, which was actually a continuation of the original series, which had the rank on the wrist as well. even though the division colors were the entire tunic sort of a deal. So these uniforms were awesome in many different ways. They had some malleability. You could pull off the shoulder thingy and open it up a little bit, let it breathe a little bit. But also, it was a thicker fabric, which allowed for thicker actors to not look terrible in them, which allowed, many of our cast to eat again after the motion picture just was horrible for everybody. And these uniforms became the iconic Starfleet uniforms from the Wrath of Kahn all the way through generations before we jumped forward to the Next Generation time. So we saw Kirk and Spock and everybody in this for six movies, starting with Wrath of Khan, going all the way through Star Trek 7. So, and I think a lot of people, understandably, think these are the best uniforms that they ever wore. Mike, what do you think of them?
Well, they do. I agree. I think they're the classiest looking, and they're the most sort of. I hate to invoke this word, but they're the most kind of give me the most military vibe.
Mm-hmm.
Much more of a formal military sort of vibe, and I like the stature that brings. I like some of the more, let's say, casual uniforms for your day-to-day missions or your day-to-day use. But when we get to the movies, and it brings a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for?
Gravitas.
A gravitas that I appreciate. And, the two-tone nature, I'm a sucker for red and black, always have been. Mm-hmm. Something about that two-tone really is very polished to me. And like you said, it looks sharp. And it sort of unifies the body build of most of our cast members. However, I will say, just looking at them and knowing what it's like on any set, I can't imagine how hot it was to shoot for 12 hours wearing that under those lights. But that's the biz, they say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would rather be too hot than wearing tissue paper.
Yeah. I get it.
And it's got some structure, but you're right. It with the militaristic gravitas, it's almost like everybody's posture improved,
mm-hmm.
because you sort of feel like, if you're wearing a suit, I feel like my posture sort of just improves naturally. Whereas,
mm-hmm.
where I'm wearing my schlubby Walmart hoodie, I look like me. So it's cool. So let us start looking at the figures themselves. So let us begin with figure 6911, Admiral Kirk. Let's have him beam in.
There he is.
So this is Kirk from the Generations line. And, again, I talked about a little bit. I can't believe Playmates did not make the original series cast in these uniforms. The only ones we have of the main original series cast are from the Generations line, which are some of the worst that Playmates ever did. Because although we're getting Kirk in that amazing uniform, you'll note this is Generations. There's no articulation at all. He has no elbow joint. He has no shoulder joint. He has no knee joint. He can't turn in, turn out. He's basically just a stick, which is odd there. And you can see there is the Generations box. We've talked about them a little bit before because we did most of the Generations figures in the Next Gen unused uniforms figures. They did do a couple of cool things in the choking hazards. Here you can see his communicator and his phaser are actually painted and look like they did on screen. So those are super cool. But I would have liked him to be able to bend his knees and elbows.
Thankfully, they gave us his name tag as well on the stand.
Well, that is the all of the stands actually. You know what? That's a great way to do it. Hop over to Toy Cam for a second, because I should point out that all of the stands were labeled with which character they were attached to for reasons I don't quite understand. And it's literally just a sticker. It's just a cheapo sticker here on the thing. So I would imagine most people will peel them off. So I don't know why they were labeled, because they don't look good, but they were. And they're just standard figures. You know, you have the different eras of communicator pins, but like they didn't make them different. Like Troy's isn't any different from anybody else's. So talk to me about Kirk here, Mr. Indeglio.
You know, he's a classic, Keith. And I just started eating a sandwich.
Could you talk about Kirk while eating? Does he make you feel like your mouth is full?
I'd just like to remind our viewing audience that this man right in front of you has been into space.
He has. He has. And actually, interesting little piece of Trek trivia. If you look behind William Shatner in the screenshot from Generations, who's that? That's Tim Russ, future Tuvok, as working on the Enterprise. I think it was Enterprise cool. B at this point that they were taking out on its maiden voyage before Kirk gets thrown into the Nexus and blah, blah, blah. There's Picard's there, and then he dies in a boring fashion. Spoiler alert.
You know, it's a classic figure. I will say that it's difficult to replicate that collar. It does work, but something about it looks a little Elizabethan to me in the figure. But you know what I mean? But they do, it is well represented, and I think it's a cool figure. Probably one of the seminal figures, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the seminal uniform. I wish it weren't the seminal figure. I wish there were another figure of this uniform, but there aren't yet. No, because we don't have very many of these, I would like to ask you, Mike, because you've seen some of these. Mm-hmm. What is your most memorable movie moment with our friend Kirk?
For some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I like when we see him. I can't remember what movie it is, but when we see him and Picard for the first time together, that's
Generations.
Cool. Yep.
Yeah.
But something about the whale movie, Keith, really sticks with me. My dad was obsessed with the whale movie. And so I've seen that one in fits and spurts, probably more than the others. And I remember at the time thinking it was bizarre. And I suspect, were I to revisit it, that wouldn't change.
No, it stays bizarre, but it's a damn good movie. Star Trek 4. It's an amazing film. It's more of like a comedy than it is sci-fi, but I loved it. Leonard Nimoy did an amazing job directing that.
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Well, one last thing. I'm sure this is an aside, but I'm going to bring it up. One thing I do know, and I've read a bit about recently, actually, because our boy James T. Kirk has been on the news quite a lot lately. You know, a lot of television shows, the lead characters don't always get along, despite popular belief. One of my favorite examples is the Golden Girls, which people think as this like happy family, and Betty White and B. Arthur did not get along. B. Arthur actually disliked her quite intensely, but you never know that on screen. So to know the ego of some people, and to the expectation would possibly be that Shatner and Nimoy did not get along, but to hear about this friendship that they had, this lifelong friendship, is really heartwarming, and I think brings an added layer to the performances and to the lore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think for me, the most iconic Kirk moment is the obvious. Let's do it together. 1, 2, 3. Kahn! Yeah. I mean, come on. How could it not be Kahn?
That's a cultural touchstone.
It really is. I mean, it was a meme before there were memes.
Could be the original meme. You're not wrong.
It's true. Yeah, there it is. All right. Well, let us move forward with another iconic, great character from this era, and that is figure 6914. It's Scotty. Here he is, of course.
Paunch and all.
Paunch and all. And look, dude's a war hero. He can be whatever size he wants to be. So, yeah.
Speaking
So
of
this
Elizabethan,
is,
it looks he is posed like he is giving a Shakespearean monologue.
he is, yes, to be or not to be.
To beam
Uh,
or not
to
to beam.
Yeah.
It was right there for you, buddy.
Oh my God. Point scored, Mike and Deglio. There it is. To beam or not to beam. I love it. Yeah. So, yeah, here he is. This is also from the Generations series, which is why he has no articulation, but at least we do get him in this uniform. And we do have another Scotty from this era, from the crossover he did with Next Generation, wearing his uniform that he actually wore in some of the movies, not his standard Starfleet uniform. But we'll talk about that figure later in the crossovers part 2, whenever we do that, because it's an amazing episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. But here is Scotty. Scotty was with us through all of the movies. So, like William Shatner, he ended up doing 7 of them, not 6 like most of the cast, because he was in Generations. And had a lot of different interesting adventures. Do you have a Scotty moment that you enjoyed, or are we delving too deep into the movie lore?
I mean, I don't have a specific moment. I do know I because I was more of a Generations guy. I remember his cameo in that film and thinking how cool it was to see I'm a sucker for that trope of bringing the old cast back in the new movie. I don't know why it is, what it scratches, but especially a show that is so seminal as the original series. I think that them making the reprise was pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I also think what they did setting that up. It was a funny scene at the beginning of Generations. But the last movie of the original cast, Star Trek 6, I thought was great. They did such a good job of, after the sort of disaster that was Star Trek 5, they're like, are we going to give them another movie? I don't know. But they did Star Trek 6, and it really gave everybody a very satisfying send-off from the original series. So I was very happy to have that. For me, the most memorable Scotty moment in the movie series, of course, was in Star Trek 4, your dad's favorite movie, when he invented transparent aluminum. And of course, when he tried to talk to the 19 era's computer and then, spoke into his mouse, a computer, it was very, very funny. According to Star Trek lore, after 1987, we're supposed to have transparent aluminum. So I don't know what's going on, why we don't have it, but that would be cool. But James Doohan, interesting guy, interesting character. I'm glad that we have a Scotty in this iconic uniform, and you can see the gold around his neck and wrist, as opposed to the white that we saw in Kirk. Now, only 3 original series characters did cameos in Generations, which is why they got figures and nobody else did, for reasons. But let's look at the last one, figure 6916, Pavel Chekov. Here he is in the screenshot there, helping Guinan, the long-lived Alorian, who was alive, of course, during the Kirk and Spock era. In fact, she was alive way back in the 1800s, hanging out with Mark Twain. Spoiler from Next Generation. So, she's been around. She's been around the block. But here is Walter Koenig as Chekov in the original amazing uniform. Again, it's from the Generations line, which means no articulation whatsoever, but at least we get the figure and the iconic uniform here. What do you think, Mike?
Cool. I mean, once again, we're in that universe of, the a little bit samey, but I always love, like I said, the black and red. You could put anybody in it. I think it's super cool.
And you can see he has the purplish gray around his neck and wrist for his rank there. And there in the box, I'm really glad that they made the communicator and the phaser. They actually bothered to paint these. which is why they look great. I don't know why they didn't bother to do that with the tricorder. I mean, I know why they didn't. But it was still. I mean, I wish they had done that. But I really like having the phaser and the communicator that look good. Like that's that. You know, I talked I think a couple episodes ago about the choking hazards and saying why even bother, right? If they don't look good, I'm not going to put them on my shelf. But those two. That phaser and that communicator, I would actually incorporate on my shelf, and get a whole mess of them, and give the entire original series stuff like that, because they did the phasers, a couple of them in the next gen era that were painted to look like them. I don't, the silly pew pew beam out of it, I would probably cut off because it looks a little silly, but nonetheless. Now, if we're looking at this box here of the Chekov. Behind the character there is a little poster of the poster for Generations, just sort of folded out. I have a mess of them. I didn't bother to take one out. I should have a better show. Would have actually taken one out so we could look at it. But it came with a little 8.5 by 11 poster of Generations with each of the boxes there. So, and it also had a promotion to be an alien on an episode, I think, of Deep Space Nine. Although, of course, if we go to Toy Cam, I have an extra Lursa in box here. Didn't have the promotion to be an alien, or I think it was maybe design an alien. Forget what it was, but we can see the back of these things. They are selling the Crossroads of Time video game on Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. So interesting there, but you can see the little poster is back there tucked behind the figures. So anyway, the Generations line is a disappointment to many folks, but I think I'm really grateful that at the very least, even with compromises, we got at least 3 of our main cast in this uniform. Because I think it was a really important uniform in Star Trek history, and it is bizarre to me that there's no Spock in this uniform, there's no McCoy in this uniform, there's no Uhura, and it's why not? I feel like those would sell really, really well if you're going to do any original series stuff, And I know why they didn't. They focused on more contemporary stuff because it was for kids, but they did a lot of original series stuff by the end of the run there, and kids were much more likely to have seen the movies than have watched the original series. So anyway, let us continue. We have 2 more figures. Only 2 more figures were ever produced wearing these uniforms, but one of them was from the movie series line, and that was not episode. Whew, come on, brain. We can do it. We can do it. Figure number 6460, Lieutenant Saavik. Here she is. Now, this character was first introduced in The Wrath of Khan.
Alley?
It is Kirstie Alley. In The Wrath of Khan. Now, she was replaced for Star Trek 3 and a cameo in Star Trek 4 by Robin Curtis over a contract dispute, I understand. Now you'll note here
those
with
Look
the
Who's
figure,
Talking sequels really ate up a lot of her
she's
time.
like, that's what happened, and then she went crazy. But we have here a figure that is much more in line with the standard figures, because this was not part of the legendarily compromised Generations line, because it was part of the movie line. We have some articulation again. So she has elbow and knee articulation and the shoulder articulation as well. She couldn't turn her feet in and out, but it actually is more like the standard figures. And we see in the back there, the classic movie series, she came with her own collector's card and some cheap blue choking hazards, but had a different base from the more of the original series base as opposed to a next-gen era communicator base. What do you think here, Mike?
I'm blown away. It's Kirstie Alley. I actually prefer the box over here. It's a cool box. It's sort of got a retro vibe that I think is really neat.
Mm-hmm.
The The character is awesome, as I've said 1,000 times on this episode alone. The red and black really does it for me. But it does. It's interesting. Maybe it's the. No, it does have it. Okay, the sort of like double-breasted lapels, super. Just I think what does it for me particularly. But yeah, it's a pretty cool figure.
Yeah, and I think, frankly, it looks very much like Kirstie Alley in that movie. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously a very young pre-Cheers Kirstie Alley.
The ears pretty cool. What's
Yeah,
with
she's
the
a Vulcan.
Okay, that's that. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, no, she's a Vulcan and is sort of the protege of Spock at this point. And so she's a cadet, so she's in training when Star Trek II comes around, and as was the crutch of most of the Star Trek movies, for whatever reason, that was the only ship in range to go deal with something around the home planet of the Federation. Oh, there's only one ship, and there's only cadets on it. Whatever,
Was the
we'll
Vulcan
figure it out.
design only the ears? Was there nothing else to it?
There wasn't a lot. They did some eyebrow stuff, but in
that's what I'm
terms of
missing.
but it's really just an exaggerated eyebrow. Like there isn't a prosthetic or a ridge there. With Spock, they just sort of shaved his eyebrows in a weird way and put makeup in it. So between just eyebrow shading and a goofy haircut, that's all that you need to be a Vulcan on
Alright.
Star Trek. Which again, from a production standpoint, you slap some ears on Leonard Nimoy and then you move on with your day, and you didn't have to spend hours and hours putting on prosthetics, which I'm sure he appreciated.
Yeah.
Because you were if you talk to Michael Dorn, who played Worf, how many hours in how many hundreds of episodes did he have to put on that makeup over and over and over again? And was still happy to do it. I mean, that is a freaking trooper.
I know Geordi gets to just throw on. LeVar just throws on a pair of glasses.
Yeah. Well, and all the humans just put on their jumpsuit, move on with their day. But if you're playing Neelix, I mean, good Lord. all of that work. I mean, and I'm sure they weren't paid more.
Right.
But they should have been paid a bonus, like for the hours spent sitting in the chair.
You don't know. Could be like hazard pay. That maybe there's something.
Should be hazard pay. I very much doubt it. But anyway, it's a good figure to have, and I mean, Lieutenant Saavik was a major character in 2 of the Star Trek movies. Only did a cameo in Star Trek 4, but certainly Search for Spock when Robin Curtis took over. She was a main character.
Yeah.
So glad to have it. And in the classic movie, okay. So here's the thing. I have a nit to pick with Playmates. The classic movie series gave us pretty close to an entire cast wearing the motion picture uniforms. The terrible, bland motion picture uniforms. They made figures of all of them and released them one by one, and they didn't fill out the cast in this uniform. I'm sure they were waiting to do a box set or something, and then and then the line collapsed. But come on now. We got to fix this. All right. But before we take up more of your day, let us go to our last figure, which is a fascinating figure, which I really enjoy when I got in my giant unboxing video. So check that out further back in our YouTube videos. You can watch me unbox nearly 300 of these bastards. But this is figure 65226, Janeway in this uniform. Check this out. So
That's cool. That is cool.
Very, very cool. So this was a Toy Fair exclusive figure. And nobody knows exactly how many were made. Probably only about 10,000 of these were made. So this was a mail away figure to get. And this was from an episode of Star Trek Voyager that was made commemorating the 50th anniversary of Star Trek in general. And what they did is using Tuvok, who was a Vulcan who lives for a very long time, they flash back to Star Trek 6 on board the Excelsior, captained by Sulu. And so, as we find out, that Tuvok, the character, actually served on the Excelsior under Sulu in the time frame of Star Trek VI.
Huh.
So he was actually there witnessing what happened in that movie. And so in this episode of Voyager, we go back and we bring the original cast from Star Trek VI, which is George Takei was there, Grace Lee Whitney as Janice Rand was there, as well as some of the other peripheral characters back onto the bridge of that and integrate our storyline into this, which was so cool because all of a sudden freaking Sulu's on Voyager from that era playing out this story, and we're seeing a secondary pathway through Star Trek VI. So we're seeing pieces of that movie which we had never seen, which is really cool. And so they do it through a mind meld, so Janeway is able to witness what's happening without actually being a part of it. But then it goes a little kafloofy, and then she's now in the uniform, and she's talking to Sulu, blah, 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 blah. Star Trek. But it ends up being so cool, and we get a chance to see Janeway in this uniform. And it's a great episode, and according to the rumor and innuendo, it was sort of a soft pilot for a possible Sulu-led TV series to take place in that timeline on the Excelsior.
That's cool.
Which I wish they had done. That would have been so cool. There's a lot of like Star Trek series that almost happened that didn't, or at least were talked about. Who knows how close they actually came to happening, but I know Michael Dorn wanted to do a Captain Worf series, which I am 100% there for. I would love to see the Captain Worf series.
It's kind of interesting because I think television was a little bit skeptical at that point. It's changed quite a bit now of extended universes, right? They were like, if we're going to do something, it's got to be brand new so that if people want to jump in, they can come in without any baggage and we can sell it as a new show. Whereas now, with streaming platforms and Marvel extended universes, it's much more common to have multiple timelines or multiple plots set amongst a singular timeline. It's much more so. As we've seen, we've got some new Trek shows coming down the pipe, but maybe we'll let's keep buying those figures, keep watching those shows, and maybe we'll see some of those cool things you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put that. Whereas before, the complex history and dynamics and rules of the world and characters and storylines were a liability. Now they're an asset because we're not trying to appeal to 100 million people. The audiences are smaller, but they're more devoted. The more meticulous the little details, the better. So I feel like they would have had a much better chance of happening.
Well, I mean,
today.
Look at Picard, right? That wasn't even on a main channel. They put that on the streaming platform.
Right. And so I would very much think that would be awesome. So I don't know if that's going to happen anymore. But I'd also like to point out, I mentioned that Grace Lee Whitney was in this. Grace Lee Whitney plays Janice Rand, who was a character in the first season of the original series, who then popped up again in the motion picture and in Star Trek VI, working under Sulu on the Excelsior, who I met once at a Star Trek convention. I met George Takei at that same Star Trek convention. Way back in 1991, they were promoting Star Trek VI, the one this takes place in, actually. So anyway, very cool to have this figure. It was another one that I got by surprise, and I was super excited to have. So sadly, that is the end of our tale of these original uniforms. So Playmates, this is definitely, we haven't done a original series and movie era missing figures, but this is definitely, spoiler alert, number one is the main cast in these uniforms. So pay attention to that as you are planning your figures moving forward. All right, well, if they would like to contact us and tell us, don't worry, we got a box set coming your way and we're going to send it to you for free to review, wink, how would they do that, Mike?
Hey, Playmates, very easy. Look at my Star Trek toys at gmail.com. Talk to us. Tell us what you need from us to let us get our hands on those new toys early.
Yeah.
If you are anybody but Playmates, you can also write us at that same email address. Look at mystartrektoys.com. Talk with us, chat at us up, comment on the episodes, show us your figures. We're still getting on those episodes. Don't you worry. I think it's pretty amazing, some of the displays people have sent us and
the customs
and stuff. Yeah. Really cool. We will be sharing that stuff. Additionally, hey, we're on the YouTube, people. Go ahead and hit the like button. Hit subscribe so you can keep up to date with us, and hit that notification bell so that we can inundate you with our new content on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Additionally, what else is there? Oh, talk to us in the YouTube comments. People are already doing so. We will get back to you. Engage with each other. Engagement keeps the channel alive. We're not asking for any money. We're not running any ads. We're just doing this for fun and for you. So, meet some friends maybe.
There it is. And you can find us on Instagram at Star Trek Toys. So, but that's it. We will be back next week with another episode. I gotta get the camera out, start shooting some figures. So we will be back. We're excited to see you. Till then, this has been...
Look at my Star Trek toys!